name is Monica Nelson, and I'm a climate justice advocate and physical oceanography PhD student, more or less in that order. I've been advocating for the well-being of our planet and its people for longer than I've been in science. So while I'm paid to be an oceanographer, I have a deep commitment to making this world a more just place. I was born in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where the beach was my happy place, because the ocean plays a huge role in making our planet a livable home. But that role can and will change as we warm the planet. And so in an effort to contribute to understanding how those ocean and climate changes would play out, I came to Scripps Institute of Oceanography, here in San Diego, renowned for its role in leading climate science research. My research is done in the northern North Atlantic, off the east coast of Greenland, between Greenland and Iceland, which is different from our ocean here based on really what the atmosphere is doing. So here we don't really have very strong seasons. The summer's not super warm, but most importantly, the winter isn't very cold. Whereas over here in this space in between Greenland and Iceland, it does get really cold in the winter. And that allows the ocean to get really cold and to mix really deep down, which is important in terms of understanding sort of climate change processes and variability to understand the cooling and also the subsequent warming in the summers. This is a really important region because it's kind of like the motor or the heart of this conveyor belt or like cardiovascular system, where warm waters from the tropics, where we have a lot of sunlight, get moved around up to the high latitudes and get really cold. And so then you have a way through the ocean for the planet to sort of regulate its temperature, make sure that the tropics don't get too hot and that the high latitudes don't get too cold. And this wintertime mixing that happens in this region where I study is sort of the connection between the warm water going north and then the cold water moving south. So we think of it as like the pump that drives this circulation. And there's a concern that with climate change, as the air gets warmer, warming the surface waters and also having more ice melt come off Greenland or come out of the sea ice in the Arctic, you'll actually weaken that overturning circulation because these warm, fresh waters are less dense, and so it's harder to push them down deep in the ocean. So we're trying to understand, is there any weakening that we already see? How does other sort of variability in the region manifest itself so that we can understand the dynamics that are really at play? How can I do that from my office here in San Diego? Why am I studying this, ocean on the other side of our country from San Diego is a matter of the fact that I really use a lot of these quite cool floats that have these sensor packages on them. So there are thousands of these instrument packages out in the ocean. They just float around at the whims of the ocean currents, and every 10 days they go up and down throughout the water column, taking temperature and salinity measurements. And then when they're at the surface, they communicate with a satellite. And so that's how we get all the data back from these floats. I'm curious about the nuances of how the ocean will respond to climate change and how it is going to affect the world's most vulnerable people soonest and worst. So I split my time between science and activism because I know that just doing science isn't going to help create the future world I want to live in.
At the beginning, when I first came here, I was really interested in understanding that scientific problem to make sure that we really knew and could well predict the future of the world that we were going to live in. But as I've gone down this kind of scientific path, I've realized I've become more and more aware, I guess, of just like the disconnect that already exists between the science that we know about how bad the world is at the end of the path that we're on. The disconnect between that and like actually doing anything about it. I feel like we already know so much about the future that we're headed towards, and that's not motivating action to reduce the fossil fuel use that is, really the root cause of climate change. And so And so I've poured, I'd say, more and more of my time into climate justice work, really joining this Green New Deal at UCSD organization that is really focused on calling out the university for the emissions that it produces, because the University of California is renowned for its climate science research, but it's not acting on that science that comes out of this institution. And so that's sort of where I find that I need to have both a foot in science for like my academic interests and also a foot in climate justice advocacy work, where I can really feel like already my work is making a difference, because science is like, it's a really long iterative process. It takes a lot of time. And while I'm at this institution, I do have a voice as a member of this community, and there's so much that the university can do in terms of changing its own operations to actually make a difference in terms of reducing emissions and starting to turn the corner in terms of the path that we're on.
It isn't easy balancing my science and activism, but it's necessary. I, along with my fellow organizers in the Green New Deal at UCSD, have the opportunity to push a massive institution to step up its emission reductions and start being the leader it purports to be. This is not an opportunity I'm going to pass up, nor an action that we can afford not to take.